Welcome to Rock That Relationship, a podcast about all things relationship with Corey and Tracy.
Now let's get real and start creating relationships that rock.
Welcome to yet another episode of Rock That Relationship. We are in season 2 and we are talking about breakups. And actually, today's episode is about that very thing, breaking up, right? The types of breakups there are, lessons we've learned, things that we would say we would never want to do again if we were being broken up with or breaking up with someone, or things that we say, yeah, I think that went well, and I really learned from that. Part of it though is when we think about it, we don't necessarily want lessons learned so that the next time we have a breakup, we're going to do it this way. And then the next time we'll do it this way. We kind of, hope that we go into our next relationship, not necessarily thinking about, what's going to happen when we break up with someone, but sometimes that's inevitable. And so it's nice to know, what can we learn about ourselves? What can we learn about the process, and how can we do it better if it does happen again? So Tracy, we are back for yet another, lively conversation. And we're going to talk today about, let's start with the 3 types of breakups. I'll introduce them a little bit and we'll talk through each of them. And then we'll end with a little bit about lessons learned. So the 3 types of breakups, really, this is kind of from our experience, is the I'm breaking up with you. Like, I know that I want to break up. Maybe you don't know that I want to break up with you, and I initiate it and I break up with you. I end the relationship. The second type is you're breaking up with me. Maybe I didn't see it coming. Maybe I did, but it's not really my choice. I'm not really interested in breaking up, but you are, and therefore we are breaking up. And then the third kind is that amicable, mutual. We both just think this relationship isn't a good fit. And it's relatively kind of equal in terms of us both thinking that we should go our own ways. But that breakup is also really significant, and the feelings and experiences from that are also important to talk about. So with that said, let's start with the I'm breaking up with you. Now, Tracy, have you ever ended a relationship with someone?
No, of course not, Corey. I've never done that. Yes, no. I have done that. Yes. And I just want to go back to your intro with saying that, yeah, we're happy about certain things we did in regards to a breakup. I just want to say again, nothing to me about breakups is good. I find them tragic and sad. And I know a lot of people are like, oh my God, it's an opportunity for growth and you can learn and all that. And I am not in that space. Now, going back over my life of the last 30 something years, yes, I have initiated breakups, and it's very, very painful no matter what, even if you want out, right? Like it's never easy. I've only ever done it in a way that's in person with a lot of processing. So I do not believe in like leaving anything unsaid ever.
And have you ever broken up with somebody like over email or text or?
My God, no.
Yeah,
I was broken up with over the phone one time. Was it text? Yeah. And I saw it coming just because the upstairs neighbor was really into her, and that was really obvious. So, and it wasn't a serious relationship, so I wasn't devastated. I just was like, hey, can we just get together and talk about this? And she's like, no. And then that was kind of it. But I've never done that. I mean, I'm serious when I say I will process everything. Yeah. I just think like you got to work it through. There's a reason you started dating someone, I mean, I've met thousands of people in my life, and I've only dated less than 10 of them, or about 10. Why on earth would I not give the time to like properly, like literally go over every little thing? Like I'm going every nook and cranny and see if there's a way to save it.
Right.
That's who I am.
It's interesting because when we talk about what we did well and what we didn't do well. So I did break up with someone one time over the phone. I think it ended up being more of a mutual breakup because we both sort of drifted. It became long distance, and it was funny because she was going to be coming out like 2 weeks later to see me. And instead of waiting that 2 weeks and then having the conversation, I wanted to talk to her before, because if she wasn't, didn't want to come out, I didn't want her to come out. But actually we ended up breaking up over the phone, which I was really difficult otherwise because of being long distance. But we decided for her to come out. We actually had a really nice kind of closure weekend, and we had fun together as friends. We talked through and processed through everything, and she slept on the couch and I didn't. And that's how we ended things. It was sort of a unique situation though, right? Because we're long distance. So if you can't see someone, it's hard to break up with them face to face. But Every other breakup I've ever had, has been face to face. Absolutely.
I have a question. Did you start that relationship out long distance? Was it long distance the entire time, or were you living in the same place and then that person moved?
I was living in the same place, and then I moved. I took a job.
Oh, you moved. Okay.
Yeah. And then we were going to try to see how long we could do it long distance, but neither of us were going to be able to live in the same place for another couple of years. So it was sort of an inevitability, but at the same time, it still made it really difficult. And it was like, all right, we lasted maybe 3 or 4 months long distance, and we just kind of drifted. And so it didn't feel as heart wrenching because I think we both saw it coming. So doing it over the phone seemed, a little bit more acceptable, and
you didn't blindside this person, I assume. No. I mean, there were kind of foreshadowings that, I think everybody with a long distance relationship has a bit of foreshadowing, right? That things might not work out.
Well, yeah, it can certainly be difficult. I just can't imagine though, if I'm in the same place as someone, and especially if I've had an investment, it's not just a few dates, but like I'm in a relationship with someone, is as difficult, awkward, or painful as it might be. I can only imagine that I would want to be in person. I've never broken up with anybody else other than that. I've had one mutual breakup, but as far as me initiating something, that was the only one I've ever initiated.
Yeah, I've never done it in that way, but I have initiated several, and they usually, I told you I used to be a lot more dramatic than I am now. So
is that usually possible? Is that
yeah,
possible?
it is. So. Oh, it is. Believe me, it is. I used to be also very reactive, and I'm not anymore, which you can attest to. I'm not that reactive.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to think. I mean, this is literally going back to the 1990s when there wasn't a such thing as text or anything, but, having those hard conversations in person, I think, they really have to happen. I mean, some breakups, I haven't had this particular experience of finding someone cheating or something, but, there's going to be times where there's something that is, I mean, you have to deal with it right then and there,
Right.
Absolutely. You can't ignore that. You can't unsee what you just saw or find out information. And I feel like, each situation is so different, but, absent some kind of threat to your safety or violence or whatever, I think that each person owes it to a person they've spent any kind of emotional investment in or time investment just to sit down and talk about it, I mean, yeah, sorry, it's going to be sad. People are going to cry but isn't it better I mean, I told you I'm very, very good friends with 2 of my exes, right? And there was a lot of drama with those relationships, but we processed everything. I mean, we really processed through everything. And I feel like that's what's allowed me to have very close friendships with them now.
Well, and I think that makes you really unique. I mean, I don't have close friendships really with any of my exes. I'm on good terms with most of them, if I saw them out, I'd, go sit down and have coffee with them, but not the kind of friendships you have. And I didn't process, the breakups in the way that you have. I mean, they came on, like I said, in some senses you could sort of see them coming, and others, they kind of were more abrupt. But I think of one of the big things that I remember about, the breaking up when I broke up with someone is, this idea about, having no possibility for reconciliation. So this is one thing that I kind of learned the hard way is if for me, if I leave myself open to reconciliation, we're going to break up for now, we're going to be like, Ross and Rachel, and we're going to be like, we're on a break, and, and then just work through it. And, if you need to take a break from each other, that's fine. But if you're going to end a relationship and then start it and end it and start it. And I realize that is not something I'm interested in. So being clear, if you're at a point where you want to end a relationship with someone, then being clear that you want to end the relationship with someone and saying, I'm going to be really clear there. And this is what I said to the person. I said, I'm moving on. You're moving on. We're not in the same place. There won't be really an opportunity for us to be together again. I wish you, in some ways I wish you well, and I hope we can stay in touch, but there's no, maybe, I didn't leave the conversation with her thinking, well, maybe I can come out in 2 weeks and we can rekindle this. I was pretty clear.
Right. Well, and you knew, right? I don't think everybody knows that they might know there's trouble. I mean, I was married for 8 years and we were getting divorced from year 1. You know what I mean? So it was an inevitable 7 years but that was a blended family situation with, a lot of really tough things. It wasn't easy just to walk away from each other. And it also wasn't easy to live with each other, and then we came up with that solution during the pandemic to buy the extra place. And then that kind of morphed into me moving into the place, and then 10 months of separation and then divorce, so it's not, and it always can't be just very clear cut. I think the thing is to act with decency through everyone and give the other person the opportunity to speak and to be heard. To me, that's so critical. And that's why I am very good friends with those two exes, because we heard each other. I heard them, they heard me, and we were able to form, really like a best friendship, and very close friendships that I value so much, as you know.
Right. Well, and I think about your particular circumstance and, kind of trying to make it work, but seeing kind of the writing on the wall as you move further and further away from each other. And I think about this, and some of our listeners might do this. I've done this before. It's like, the threat to break up. Well, maybe we should just get divorced. Well, let's just break up. Well, we're going to break up. And then it's like 2 days later, you're like, oh, I don't want to break up anymore. And using it as like a leveraging tool to hurt the other person versus an actual intentional, either we're going to end this relationship, we're going to try to work on this relationship, something, but not using it as kind of that wedge, right? And it sounds like for your breakup, it went over the course of time because you had a lot at stake. You did have, there were children involved and there were, you had homes together and all sorts of things. But it's interesting how quickly we jumped to like, okay, let's just break up. And then like 2 days later, you're like, I'm really super sad. And
here's the thing though, like, right. But you said leverage. And I think there are some people who do that in a manipulative way, and it can be perceived that way. Also, there are people who do it that way. And then I did it when I was very reactive and when I did not have the same emotional control that I have now due to years in therapy, where it's not that I was trying to use it as leverage. It's that I didn't know any other way to deal with anything other than I'm leaving. I can't take this. I need my freedom. I have to get out of here, and
right. Like
what I've learned about that. Right. Yes. And I was always in flight mode, and I would never leave. I would literally go 5 feet out of the room, and then I'd be like, oh, I'm sorry. But what I learned is even saying that stuff was so destabilizing. Right.
Absolutely.
So I'm never going to do that again. Like I've changed, all this therapy has helped me to not be reactive. And sometimes that's like an outlet. It's like the only way somebody knows how to deal with stuff. And I think that's why becoming so educated about relationships, about psychology, about attachment, styles is you can understand what the other person's doing. You can understand what you're doing, Yep. And people want me to date now, and I don't want to because I really need to be figuring out myself so I don't ever act like that again. I didn't act like that in the last relationship, but I acted like that in the relationships before. And I think I've said this before. I've apologized to those people, including the ones I'm very good friends with. It is destabilizing.
Absolutely. It's destabilizing for the relationship, and it's destabilizing for the eventual breakup, because you don't really know if you're coming or going.
Right.
And it is difficult and it is painful. And I understand what you're talking about. You kind of feel like you're up against the wall, and the only thing you can do is just be like, I'm out of here. I'm out of here. And that can become really overwhelming. Well, kind of switching gears a little bit on the I'm breaking up with you and some of the things, I'm kind of reminded of a time in which I, established ground rules for a breakup. I've done this a couple times, actually 3 different times I've done it, where we've established kind of ground rules, like we're breaking up. And, let's talk about, who gets what, if we were living together, or what we were doing, who goes to which events with friends. If we're both invited to something, should we both go? Should we not go? And even in one relationship, we had almost like a ground rules that we created before we ended up breaking up, not in the hopes that we would, but just in case we did. Like, what happens if we're on the same cell phone plan and you're angry at me? Are you going to cut my phone off? Or, are we going to share a membership to a museum or something together? What are we going to do? And so, being mindful that breaking up is an intentional process that depending on how far into the relationship you are, it takes a lot of unraveling. And so certainly the most extensive is like a legal divorce and children and homes and those kinds of things. But what do you do if you break up with someone who you work with and you have to see them?
Here's something so interesting that like people, okay, what was that book that I mentioned? You're reading it also. Here's Where This Marriage Ends. That, most relationships actually end up in breakup or divorce, but yet people still get into them. And I think that the stuff you're talking about, people are too emotional to do at the time of breakup. But that'd be so great if people did that when they got together. Like, hey, let's make this plan for the possibility that this could go wrong while we're not angry. I mean, that's what people should do with their child custody things, not when they're furious at each other, right? Because when people are getting broken up with, or they're breaking up, there's ego issues involved. There's terror. There's fear. There's, my God, I'm not going to have any place to live. I'm going to lose my friends. I'm going to not see my kids. Somebody else is going to raise my kids. All of that. And it makes it almost impossible. Like, the brain has gone on overdrive, right? Like, it can't really sit down and do that. I mean, you can, because you're that kind of person who can make a list if, we were in the middle of the apocalypse. That's why I'll be sticking with you.
But I mean, I think you're right, doing it beforehand. But some people say that's fatalistic, right? Like, if you make a breakup plan before you get at the beginning of a relationship, I mean, I don't know. Let me just ask you, is that any different than a prenup?
Well, yes, it's just, how about this is how a prenup is, obviously only legal to protect your assets.
Right.
But this would be similar idea.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to act with, look, while we're buddies, while we're good friends, while we're still like each other, this is how we should divide these things up. And let's stick to a plan. Let's have a contract between the two of us. And, there's that whole thing that people have of, like, the contract of looking at each other and choosing each other every day. Like, I still choose you. I want to be with you, because then you're checking in. And I'm just saying, yeah, it'd be great if people could look at that, not as fatalistic, but as just practical. And that when you're in your right mind, when you're not in extreme suffering, and that's the thing. When I've said this before, grief is grief and loss is loss. And some people are going to take breakups way harder than others, right? And it can be devastating for someone, and they cannot think, Yep. It's like they're like, their mind's gone into a fog or something, or overdrive, or whatever happens to them, and they can't think, they can't do that, or they're just angry and they're going to retaliate, Right. And if they had some assurance ahead of time that they're not going to lose this, or, this isn't going to happen, I think it would go a long way. But I think that's also along the thing of, like, when you get with someone, you should probably sit down and talk about all these, like, was that 8 dates, how do we want to manage this? How do you want to do this? How would you run your life? Yeah. I mean,
and it could also help you too, in a sense where, so say you have this contract, it also might help you end a relationship that you don't want to be in without having the fear of things like, well, we just renewed the car insurance and paid it for the year. Like, I can't, I'm going to wait it out until our car insurance is paid. I mean, people hold on to things like, where am I going to live? What am I going to do? And if you have this, if you have like this kind of agreement or contract, and it says, I promise that I won't, we'll make sure that we each can use our cell phones on our cell phone plan for 3 months until we transition over, then I'm not maybe holding back from ending a relationship for the logistical matters that are unknown, because they will be known. Right. Through some type of a contract. Now, I mean, it sounds scary. Our listeners are probably like, oh my gosh, a breakup contract. But I will tell you, I've used one before, and I put one together with the person I was with, and we ended up using it. And out of the most, even if it were the most difficult times, we held to that. We actually went and got it notarized.
Wow.
Not that it would hold up in a court of law per se, but really this idea that we were committed to the fact that we weren't going to purposely hurt each other, right. Even down to who got the family pet. Like, right. Some people don't break up because they're afraid someone's going to take the dog.
Right. That would be me.
Yeah.
Right? Oh, well, no one I date wants my dogs. That's the weirdest thing. I keep dating these non-dog people, so I always get my dogs.
Well, now you got this new puppy.
I'm leaving with the dogs.
You got this new puppy. You may start attracting different people. All right, let's switch gears a little bit. Let's talk about being broken up with. So Tracy, have you been broken up with before?
Yes. This is the one that's going to cause me to cry or get just very upset. So it's terrible. I don't like it. It really depends on like I said earlier about that one breakup, whatever, I didn't really care. But when I was very, very much in love with someone and she broke up with me, it was absolutely devastating.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and particularly if you're blindsided, right? Sometimes the breakup is who breaks up with who is almost like a formality. It was like it was coming. Who's just the one to finally say the words. But in some cases, the breakup comes out of nowhere, and it's like, what in the world? I've never had a breakup that really came out of nowhere. So I've never really been blindsided, although I have been broken up with. But all of the times I've been broken up with, really, it's been mostly we've tried to work through it. We couldn't work through it, and the other person just sort of, put the, just the ended the whole thing,
Yeah. And I've never been blindsided, but I've been devastated by the lack of wanting to work on it. I guess that's, I think, equally as painful as being blindsided. Is like, you don't even want to try. You don't even want to put the work in. I like I said, I'll never understand that because it's not who I am. I will put the work in till the last cow goes home.
Yes, wherever home is, they usually are home, right? But yeah, I hear you, right?
They might be walking and taking a trip, Corey. They might be out on their fence post might have gotten broken down. Okay,
yeah, cow road trip. Yeah. Anyways, so I mean, and I think that goes into this idea of like when we're broken up with, even if it's like kind of a long time coming and that person just did the straw, or maybe it's that you were blindsided, is this idea of having and making time, at least on your end, to ask questions for clarity, but know that you're also maybe not going to get the truth. I know that if you're broken up with and you say, why, you might get some kind of answer that is not really the truth, but is the easy answer for that person to kind of skedaddle right out of that situation and be like, I'm out of here. So even if you want that clarity, you might never get it, and you might never get closure from them. So even if you process through, and I know, Tracy, you have your friendships with your two exes. You didn't just process right after you broke up. You've been processing for years and years after all that heated emotion has come down, where some of that truthfulness can come out, but in the moment, sometimes it just can't. Because
and sometimes people are just going to not want to do it. And that's, for me, the hardest thing is to like, that person just doesn't want to do it. And you just have to find a way to let go. So you have to use all of your, breakup aids, your therapist, your friends, your whatever, you're occupying your mind, you're busying yourself, because you can't make someone else do anything. You can't make them talk to you. You can't make them want closure, and
you can't make them tell you the truth as to why they don't want to be in the relationship anymore. And you may never get that truth. And that's, for me, that's always been one of the hardest things, is really not being able to identify, like, specifically, like, this is why this one relationship ended. Because, and not being able to get that clarity from that person. And maybe the person that I was with did, in all these occasions, didn't know themselves, but just knew that something wasn't right, or it wasn't going the direction that they wanted. And so that clarity might be kind of muddy for everyone, and you may never, ever get it. And that's, for me, one of the harder parts, is like, now I'm sad that I have this loss, but I don't know why I have this loss. And years later, I'm still trying to figure that out.
Right. And I mean, I think, you got to work it out in your own life and your own world and your own mind. And that's, I think, the cost of loving somebody else, or putting your trust in another person, or living in this world in general. We don't know why people do what they do. And not all people are going to give us an answer. And either we become hermits and decide not to engage, or we take that risk. I've decided it's worth the risk, but it's still extremely painful.
Well, absolutely. It's really difficult. And you and I have talked about our two kind of behaviors that, if we're not careful, we get sucked into, which is rumination and speculation, which is trying to, and there's ways to use anticipation and kind of understanding of other people's psyches to see why they might behave a certain way. But sometimes we slip into this rumination of just replaying, well, maybe it was that one party we went to, and this person was ignoring me, and then I did this, and then that must have been the last straw for them. Or you're speculating, I'm sure that they are cheating on me, right? Or I'm sure that they have a double life, or whatever. And those things don't help. And when we think about closure and we talk about closure, that will be something that is really important to think about. How do you separate rumination and speculation from really anticipation and understanding?
Well, you got to get a friend to slap you out of it.
Yeah, you
it's not helping. It's not helping, right?
You tell me that you are ruminating. That's what you tell me. You are speculating. And usually you stop very abruptly on a trail that we're walking very fast on, and I nearly slam into your back. And then you yell at me, and then I kind of get it together.
It snaps you out of it, right?
Yeah, it does.
Because it doesn't help. It really doesn't. You could spend hours doing it, and then guess what? You're back at the same point, and you don't have an answer for anything.
Exactly. So have you ever like rushed into dating someone else just to show your ex that you've moved on to make them jealous? Not that you were actually interested in someone else and you moved on quickly, but really that you got back into the dating scene just to kind of, maybe validate yourself and validate, in front of your ex.
I did what you just said. I did date someone in the 90s just to make someone else jealous. And it really was a huge mistake. It didn't go well.
It didn't go well.
It wasn't a good choice for the person. I screwed myself basically, because then my ex thought, like, she even told me, have a good life with what's her name. And I was like, what? I don't even like her that much. It's you that I like, and that was a big mistake. I've never done that again, but that's the thing. Yes, I did it. I'm not proud of it. It was a terrible idea. And that's why no matter what kind of rude things people say to me now or things that happen, I'm not ever doing that again. I'm not jumping into that. I'm not getting over it. I'm not, right. I want to work through my process and not do that. It doesn't work. I don't think it's ever worked for anybody in the history of the world. And yet people continue to do it.
Right. Exactly. And some people may move on quickly after a breakup and have genuine feelings. And that's one thing, but some people just run out there and grab the first person they can. And to basically.
Or they grab an intentional person to make that other person jealous. And that it's games playing and it doesn't work. And then now you've involved somebody else's feelings and emotions, or you've gotten with somebody you really shouldn't have,
Right. Now you just created a kind of a mess. Yeah.
Yeah. For yourself. That's what I did. I got into a mess.
Yep. Okay. Well, let's talk about we both want to break up. It's kind of mutual, even if one person did say it, both of you were like, yeah, we shouldn't be together. I had actually one of these. It was really interesting because as we talked earlier about doing it over text or doing it in person, or even thinking about where to do it, like doing it in a neutral place kind of thing. We were actually driving in a car coming back from a trip. And we had this conversation, I don't know, 10 minutes into the ride. We still had like 2 or 3 hours to go on the trip. And it was like, all of a sudden we just decided to break up in the car. And then we're in the car awkwardly sitting there for the next few hours, and we lived together. So then we got home and it was like, what are we going to do?
Wow.
Yeah. So it was very awkward, even though we both kind of saw it coming and we wanted it. And I think what you said earlier is really important. And it's particularly important with this scenario is that breaking up is painful, whether you're the one that's breaking up with someone you're being broken up with, or it's mutual and it's just not the right, fit for you. It's still sad. It is still hard. You are still grieving, and other people might say, well, hey, that person wasn't, a good fit for you, and it. Now you can find your person. That's fine and all. It's still sad. You've invested in this person. You probably loved them, cared for them, maybe had a life with them, and it's sad and hard.
Totally agree. I don't think it's ever easy. I mean, was my marriage, I think it was clear that it wasn't the best match, but that doesn't mean that we didn't have a lot of, love for each other and enjoyment in a lot of things of each other. It's just, there were some real fundamental differences, that couldn't be overcome, but doesn't mean you don't miss or won't miss all those other things, in that it's really hard to let go of that.
Absolutely. So, the other thing to think about is, even if it's an amicable breakup, it's going to still be awkward with your day-to-day life. Like if some people need to live together for a while until one of them can find a place, and that can be tricky. You have the same friends, potentially. You might work in the same place or go to the same places of worship, or you're in the same tennis league, whatever that is. And you got to sort of negotiate. Can you get along and be in those same spaces together, even after the breakup? Or, do you have to sort of divide and conquer? And I remember with this breakup where we were in the car, we decided that we needed to live together for a while until we both found places to live. And so it was several months, and we decided that we were just better off as friends. And we really did have a nice friendship, but it did get a little awkward there for a while with our friends, who all of a sudden decided they felt the need to take sides when neither of us actually felt that there were sides to be taken. And it ended up getting awkward and ended up getting, painful months after. And that was really the most distressing part of it all, was that, at the end of the day, we just weren't together anymore and things were changing. And the best thing for us to do at that point, and we did, was to take a break and heal. And it was like, even though we have a friendship and it's good, let's take several months and just do our own thing, get reestablished, re-routined, all of that. And then maybe we'll find our way back to each other as friends.
That's smart. So
Yes.
if you're not super emotional, you can do that,
Well, if you are super,
you can both agree to do that.
Yeah. If you both agree, and then you can go your own way. And I remember, we've talked a lot about like the witching hours and, how difficult it is in the evenings. And we had lived together, and I remember the evenings were just really quiet. I moved in with a roommate, and it was so weird. And it would get dark out at night, and I'm all by myself. And I remember thinking, why am I doing this? We're just friends. I don't even have any interest in being with her. Why? But I knew that I needed that healing time. And then eventually, actually, before we even reconnected as friends, I ended up moving.
Mm-hmm.
And so
because of that, though.
No, I got a new job and I moved. And so it was like, oh, okay, well, I mean, maybe we weren't destined to be friends. We still connect every once in a while on like social media and stuff. And if I'm ever out that way, I would love to have coffee. But yeah, we never did rekindle a friendship, but we were so invested right away of like switching and transitioning the relationship into a friendship to make the breakup feel less horrible, that we ended up just really needing to take a break from it all in order to just be true to ourselves.
Yeah, I think I don't know. I think there's no perfect way to do it. You got to do what's working at the time.
Right.
Well, the way not to do it is to be nasty, is to be revengeful, is to be not, I like to use a different word, but then I'll just say bad mouthing, but to talk, like try and get, I don't do this. Like, oh, you're my friend or whatever. I mean, of course I have my best friends, and they're not ever going to be sticking around, hanging out with the other person or being their Facebook friend, my best friends. But like those people that are just friends, you like, the worst thing you can do is try and like get them to your side, or, just don't even do any of that. It's ugly. It doesn't work. It's rude. It's unnecessary. People will gravitate to who they want to gravitate. And if you're trying to go out and like collect friends, I think it just makes you look bad, and it's really uncomfortable for everyone. Like everyone else shouldn't suffer because you're going through a breakup.
Right. Well, that really hits on these kind of lessons learned. So regardless of like, if you're the breaker upper or you're broken up with, or it's mutual, the idea of, take the high road, even if you've been wronged, even if like your ex did something awful to you. This is the few things I've learned is don't play games. Like, don't keep them from seeing their pet, or don't not give them back their favorite shirt. I mean, you can leave it on your front porch and you can say, pick it up when you want. I mean, but withholding it or burning it and then taking a picture and sending it to them. I mean, I understand where the anger and the angst comes from, but I always say, take the high road, take the high road, take the high road. And I've said that to myself through every different kind of ethical dilemma I've had, not just relationships, but the idea is, I have to go to bed and sleep with myself at night and say, am I feeling okay about who I am and how I showed up today? And would I rather have known that I burned my ex's favorite shirt, or that I left it in a package out by my mailbox and texted and said, come by and pick it up? I would feel better about that. So, the high road looks different for everybody, but really it's, you'll feel better about yourself if you did what, quote, the right thing. And the right thing might be dependent on the situation. Obviously, if you're in like an abusive relationship, you don't want to have any contact. That makes sense. Don't give the shirt back. But in a general circumstance where the breakup was, not anything that was, violent or anything threatening, that, thinking about how not to play games.
Right. I think that's it. Don't play games. Don't be a bad mouther. Don't try to collect friends. Don't,
Yes, exactly. Don't try to punish them, get back at them, date somebody to show them up.
None of that stuff is good. It doesn't make you feel good. It might make you feel good for like 5 minutes. And then you can have the fantasy in your mind. I think fantasizing about it is fine, but don't act on it. You know what I mean? Everyone's got to have a fantasy, right? I mean, everybody does. You maybe could inner gloat if something bad happens to them, but really, you don't really want something bad to happen, and you don't want them to have, just keep it to yourself, basically. And then if you keep it to yourself and then do your working through it of like accepting that things are the way they are, and rather than being angry about it and just learning to accept what is, it'll be much better for you in the long run.
Right. Well, we go back to, we said this on several episodes, is, it's like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. So again, that's a lot of what we're talking about here with this series, is really that, we have to invest in our relationships. We have to invest in our relationship with ourselves too, in our own health and wellness, so that we can, kind of show up in a way that feels emotionally intelligent, that feels safe, that feels good and feels fulfilling. And that sometimes that means that we do things like, we take the high road. We want to do those things, not play games, and, have a productive, movement out of relationships. Cause sometimes, like in this case, breaking up is leaving a relationship is really important. All right. We are just about out of time. Just kind of, as we wrap up, it's really interesting as we talk about, breakups and, whether or not we're breaking up with someone we're being broken up with, or if the feeling is mutual kind of thing. There's still a lot of similarities between all of them. It hurts. It's sad. It's hard, even if the breakup was, kind of for the better. But in the end, just remembering that, we have to look at ourselves in the mirror about how we handled ourselves during a breakup, and thinking about how can we show up in ways that are productive and healthy, and, and also not playing games, not dangling breakups in front of someone like, I'm going to break up with you, or I'm leaving, or, trying to expect that the other person will provide clarity and closure, but really just doing the self-work that we keep talking about with the resources that we have, like therapists and friends, and even our own experiences with journaling or our own self-awareness. All right. We are, excited again. We've got so many episodes in this season all about breakups, and thanks, Tracy, for the great conversation. And until our next episode, get out there and rock those relationships. If you liked what you heard, check out our show notes for resources from today's episode. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and Instagram under Rock That Relationship, and go to our website at rockthatrelationship.com for updated episodes and more great information.
Thanks for listening. Now go rock those relationships.